each other the sort of questions that nobody else asks us. So do you want to start with question one? Or do you want
except our spouses from time to time. Yeah, I've got one, and it's a kind of professional question. I'm jealous, Rhys, because you have the kind of imagination that enables you to write books in times in which you haven't lived, in places that you're not living in as you write them. I can't seem to manage that trick. I don't think I have the imagination for it. And I want to know how I can develop that kind of imagination so I can do what you do.
Well, this presupposes that I wasn't actually born in 1903. But I don't know, I've always been a great pretender. As a child, I would pretend to be all sorts of things all the time. And I think I've loved to live in that fantasy world. I mean, even from the point of, I was once a squirrel. And I had this stash of, well, they weren't really nuts, they were really puffed wheat at the bottom of my bed. And I used to climb down to the bottom of my bed, and I'd be in my burrow, and I'd eat my puffed wheat. So I'm used to being other things. I think the moment you make that leap into believing that you can be other things, you can do it. The other thing is I'm really interested in the research. I don't know about you, but I love doing my research. I love finding out all those little things.
I'm the same, although I've never communed with a squirrel.
Yeah, I love going back in time. It's easy in places like New York too, where there is so much of it that still exists, and you can actually walk the streets, my characters walk, and you get that real feel. And sometimes it's really spooky. I was there for this festival of San Gennaro in Little Italy, and the streets, Mulberry Street had booths going down either side of it that were selling great spoils of sausage, and all these smells, and for the first time, the sound level was so enormous, you realize the sound echoing back from those tenements on either side. You think, this is what it was like. And then I got halfway down the street and I came to this booth, a tent, and it said, "Freak show. Come and see the snake woman, 50 cents. And I thought, my God, I've been transported back. I mean, really, I got goosebumps. So when you get something like that, you really do get the feeling for it.
That actually supports a theory I have, which is that when you're doing the characters the right way, that is really putting your own mind in the minds of your characters, and for me, ideally walking in the footsteps of those characters, I have a feeling, I've never acted, but I have a feeling it's a process that's a lot like what an actor does to prepare for a role. You really have to start feeling like that character to understand the way that character would look at the world and how that character would behave, and it sounds like that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think when you do a series, as you probably found out too, it's like an ongoing friendship. To start with, you just have a vague idea about the person you're writing about, and then they gradually reveal more and more of themselves, so by the time you get to book 6 or book 7, you know a lot about them. And of course, you've jumped away from a series now, so you're going to have to start from square one again.
Yeah, and it's quite a challenge. I forgot when I got started on Fault Line, I was thinking, well, this is going to be a fairly similar process, take us a fairly similar amount of time. And no, when you're writing a series, it's as though the foundation is, in fact it is, the foundation has been created, and all you're doing is building a new structure, but building that foundation takes a long time. So yeah, imagining all those new characters from
and you've
the
got,
start
you've got the whole, I mean, especially in the case of Molly, for example, the whole environment is there. It's like writing one very, very long novel, really, because you've built up your subsidiary characters, you know the whole environment, you know what it looks like, you know what your character would wear on a particular day, and then when you start a new series, you have to start from square one again, like, well, where would they keep the cornflakes in this house, sort of thing.
And do you do a lot of reading about that? I mean, how did people live in 19th century New York for Molly Murphy novels?
I do lots of things. One is to read books written in the time. You know, if you read someone like Henry James, or you read Mark Twain's letters. And also, my grandmother and great-aunt were sort of teenagers at that time. And I recall how they spoke to each other. For example, the formality of, some people make this huge mistake of having people call each other by their first names and things like that. They wouldn't do that. They were terribly formal. And the best thing for me has been all the photographs. 1900, you know, the Kodak Brownie camera. You could get a photograph of any street in New York you wanted, you can look at it. You can look at all the interiors and see those fussy little bird cages they had and everything. You could bring in, you know, it's fabulous.
Yeah, I don't even remember what I used to do before the rise of the internet. And I don't know what authors did generally, but it's the most amazing resource. When I was writing my 6th book, Requiem for an Assassin, John Rain goes back to Vietnam, and he hasn't been there in a very long time. And so I had to, and I visited Saigon for research, which was great, but I'm seeing Saigon in the 21st century. And okay, Rain is seeing it at the same time as I am, but he's also seeing it from the perspective of a man who was there as a soldier 30, 40 years earlier, and 30 years earlier. And so how do I see it from his perspective? Well, I came across a fantastic website of before and after photographs from a U.S. Army vet who took pictures at the time and posted them alongside more recent photos. And he said, for example, here's the Royal Hotel, this is still the same, and this is still the same. It was fantastic to be able to see it from this guy's point of view. I thanked him in the acknowledgments for the book.
Yeah, the thing with the internet is that some things are wrong. You know, you have to double check. I did one of my books.
I thought it was all true on the internet.
One of my books ended up with the assassination of President McKinley. And on the internet I got whereabouts in the Temple of Music he was shot. And then I found a postcard that someone had sent back home from the Temple of Music with a little X saying, you know, I was there and this is where he was shot. And it was completely, I was annoyed because I'd already written the scene with them being up in the balcony. It's like, this isn't going to work, and I had to move the whole scene around. But you have to double check anything that gets on Wikipedia, it gets passed along and along and along as a fault.
Yes, I've also discovered that sort of thing in my
And the thing with the internet is all those little things. When I